Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. We are 28 days away from what would be one of the biggest strikes in recent history in the United Corporations of America. That would be auto workers at Ford, Stellantis, General Motors going on strike. And UAW President Shawn Fain has some direct, sharp words for President Biden. And CNBC's Jim Cramer continues to melt down about the Trotskyite president of the UAW. Let's start with what I thought was pretty interesting direct words from United Auto Workers President Shawn Fain to the Detroit News. As you know, yesterday, 2 days ago, he called for a strike authorization vote for all UAW workers to vote to authorize a strike so that if a contract is not met by the deadline of September 14th, they would be ready to go on strike. In an interview with the Detroit News, headlined Inside the UAW's Confrontational New Political Strategy, Fain had some words for President Biden. Biden, a Democrat who has repeatedly called himself, quote, the most pro-union president in American history, says he shares the UAW's vision of a future industry filled with high-wage union jobs. The union's new leadership has been publicly pushing him to prove it, arguing his administration hasn't done enough to demand higher wages and benefits in exchange for billions of dollars in federal subsidies for electric vehicle manufacturing. Quote, the UAW strategy in Washington changed because it had to, Shawn Fain told the Detroit News. Quote, if we're going to represent and deliver for our members, we had to change the way that things were being done. That started, Fain said, by, quote, making it clear that endorsements are earned, not expected. In May, the union said it would withhold its endorsement for Biden's reelection campaign until the administration showed it supported, quote, a just transition to electric vehicles. Fain has held multiple meetings on Capitol Hill to rally support from lawmakers, even as he publicly criticizes the lack of protections in the Inflation Reduction Act, a bill many Democrats consider their marquee accomplishment. Oh, God. And when the Department of Energy, under the leadership of former Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm, announced in June plans to loan $9.2 billion to Ford's joint venture in Kentucky and Tennessee, the largest such loan in the agency's history, Fain asked, quote, why is Joe Biden's administration facilitating this corporate greed with taxpayer money? Because clearly the multi-billion-dollar corporate conglomerate Ford needed $9.2 billion to do the right thing and pivot to electric vehicles. But key in this statement to Detroit News, endorsements are earned, not given. He's telling Biden, don't just assume and take for granted like you do every other voting bloc. We're not going to endorse you right away. We might actually just choose not to endorse, which would be the equivalent in terms of the United Auto Workers of not endorsing Biden, endorsing the opponent, which could be Trump, obviously. These are some fighting words because the UAW for decades has just been automatic, in the tank, cozy with the Democratic Party. For him to be telling Biden, no, platitudes are not going to be enough. Crumbs are not going to be enough. You better prove that you're going to be with us, particularly on electric vehicles, because this whole push for electric vehicles, which of course I'm for, is not going to be satisfactory to us if the status quo continues of these electric vehicle factories offering workers and paying workers half of what the workers at, gas vehicle factories are working. He's putting Biden on notice. Your platitudes and, vague statements of support for our right to organize ain't going to be enough. And frankly, the White House is sweating. To be clear, the White House is sweating. Quote, some Democrats say the shift in tone and approach initially came as a surprise to the White House. Quote, I would say they were not necessarily anticipating that kind of hardball, said Representative Hillary Scholten of Grand Rapids. Obviously, I don't work in the White House. I don't have a direct channel, but I know it caught a number of us by surprise. And I heard that the White House was like, what is happening here? Yes, Joe Biden and the White House are saying, what is happening here? What is this shit with this union mouthing off? Not unilaterally surrendering to our will and to our crumb cake that we have offered the worker bees and the auto workers for the last few decades. Who do they think they are? Yeah, They are surprised and peeved, I would say. But Fain needs to continue with the pressure. And if necessary, he needs to go a little bit more aggressive towards Biden in the White House. It's one thing to say endorsements are not given, they're earned. It's another thing to criticize the president for not doing enough. That should be the next step, because Biden, in an election year where he is tied with a 4-time indicted former president, cannot afford a militant, popular new president of the United Auto Workers going at him by name and sharply criticizing him, which I hope would be the next steps from Fain if Biden is not going to do any more than put out meek, statements of platitudes in support. He needs to call for Biden to stand with them on the picket lines if necessary, which I don't see happening, and actually call out the companies for their greed and exploitation of the workers. Speaking of greed and loving exploitation of workers, have you noticed that CNBC's god, Jim Cramer, their big star, has been having a real-time meltdown over this new militant United Auto Workers leader who dares to speak up and not just unilaterally surrender to these greedy ghouls at Ford, GM, and Stellantis? He's basically, I think he has compared him to communists. He has said he wants the downfall of capitalism. And now he's calling him Trotsky. Yes, Trotsky. Buckle up, get some popcorn. Here's Jim Cramer's latest and greatest meltdown.
It's just not a great market right here. And a lot of people worried about the strike. The Ford, GM, Stellantis strike.
I assume you heard the UAW's president line about basically we're not going to take.
Yeah, I mean,
and now we have some dates on authorization votes.
Yeah, having been a union member who helped lead a wildcat strike, well, of course, which I was immediately fired. I would stress that, it was different here. I would stress that there used to be, we forget, in the 70s there were these union moves where we really went hard. And we boycotted J.P. Stevens, and the result was we put J.P. Stevens out of business. This guy is like when I was in my union, where it was united, the people never be defeated. And there was a Trotsky-like element that we believed that the people should own the companies. This guy has got that Trotskyite feel.
Yeah. Ed Yardeni looked at what happened in the 70s because union membership was so high.
Yes.
All these COLAs would react to, say, energy, but that's not the case today if you look at union membership.
Look, I got to tell you that this guy is a throwback to the days when you were trying to figure out how much money you had in your strike fund to see whether you could outlast the companies. I know Jim Farley's beside himself, CEO of Ford. I don't think people are ready for this. This is not, the writer's strike is pretty strong, but I think this man doesn't care whether they shut down the autos for months. It's going to be a claymation death match between Shawn Fain, and the unions. Now, Mary Barr is one tough person, but if you go and look over her conference call, she dismisses the union entirely as being an issue. Farley doesn't feel that way. And Stellantis, obviously, when they ripped up Stellantis, when Fain ripped up Stellantis' offer, that felt very much like the way that the UAW used to be, which is that we're going to target somebody and we're going to wipe them out if we have to. Unions want to get rid of the 401k and IRA.
Right. Yep, we're less than a month away from that.
I'm not a psychologist, but what he says, I don't think you're ready for this. I don't think Jim Cramer's ready for this. He's just used to the good old days of unions and labor basically being one and the same with the big three corporate CEOs. He's used to the good old days of embezzlement and bribery among the union bosses at the UAW and other unions, to be fair. He's used to the heads of these unions basically existing to enrich themselves, take lavish vacations, and unilaterally make decisions for the rank and file worker bees. He's not used to a militant president visually tossing a shameful, insulting contract in the garbage. He's not used to a militant, aggressive president rallying the worker bees, like for real, and actually putting in the infrastructure to potentially go on strike for the long term for months, even if it does have to shut down the auto industry. Because what's the alternative? To continue to make, paycheck to paycheck wages, to lose pace in terms of what these workers are making when you factor in cost of living adjustments, inflation, they're making less. To continue to have your pension attacked by these corporate ghouls and CEOs that are making between $20 and $30 million at Ford, GM, and Stellantis. It sounds like he wants that to continue because that's good for the stock market. That's good for CNBC's viewers. And that's good for Jim Cramer. Status quo is good for Jim Cramer. This Trotskyite, this Marxist who dares to stand up for the masses and the proletariat who have been run over by a Mack Ford truck, run over by the same vehicles that they manufacture. Jim Cramer is totally down with the class war as long as the workers lose. If you didn't see, let's show Shawn Fain's comments on the class war that the corporations have been waging against auto workers for decades.
But that's why we're undeterred in our demands. No matter how company executives or their lackeys in the media try to distort them, some in the media claim that our union is engaged in class warfare. It's hard when I hear that not to just die laughing, because the truth is, the working class in this country has been under attack in a one-sided class war for decades. Just as UAW President Doug Fraser wrote all the way back in 1978 when I was 10 years old. He stated, I quote, "I believe leaders of the business community, with few exceptions, have chosen to wage a one-sided class war today in this country. A war against working people, the unemployed, the poor, the minorities, the very young, and the very old, and even many in the middle class of our society." End of quote. Those words are even more relevant today than they were in Fraser's time when I was 10 years old.
I'll tell you what, we're 28 days away. I'm pretty sure we're at a 97, 98% chance there's going to be a strike, and I'm pretty sure it's going to last a while. And I'm pretty sure, well, I'm definitely sure I will be there and Status Coup will be there. I cannot tell you how long we will be there because it costs a lot of money to be on the road and cover these stories on the ground for as long as it takes. Please sign up today if you can to support our on-the-ground reporting so that I could be on the road covering the strikes on the picket lines, because I promise you the corporate media, if they cover it, will definitely be on the side of GM, Ford, and Stellantis. We already know whose side Jim Cramer is on.